It's the Carter Man, and I'm wearing my John Deere hat today for two reasons. One is I mentioned the other day I own a landscaping company now, partner in it, because I like blue collar people. I was raised in blue collar Baltimore, and I like blue collar people. I like people who actually go out and work for a living, which is why I hate politicians. Despite the fact I spent 50 years at the highest levels of politics in Washington, I never lost my love for those who actually go out and make America work by actually working, unlike the politicians. But I'm wearing the hat today to kind of celebrate the Supreme Court decision ruling that Biden's very cynical, self-serving, politically motivated, and actually cruel unilateral decision to forgive student loans, as if he had the right to forgive loans, was unconstitutional. The Supreme Court ruled that, thank God. The fact of the matter is that there should never have been a question about that, because it never should have been done. In fact, Biden himself had earlier admitted it was not constitutional, not that he cares. And one of the primary arguments used against it was Nancy Pelosi's very strong repeated statements that it was unconstitutional before she supported it, okay? Because that's what politicians do. They talk out of both sides of their mouths and they lie. That's why we need to clean up the political system. But the fact of the matter is that the decision really benefited working folks, real world working folks, okay? The folks that go out and get their hands dirty to make a living, and instead of those who play politics, okay? Play politics. Which reminds me, Chuck Schumer's statement was so outrageous that the people of New York ought to toss his butt out of office immediately, ask him to resign, saying that it was a rich people MAGA decision by the Supreme Court to punish poor people. I think it was just the opposite. It helped poor people, as opposed to the many of the wealthy people who could afford to go to college and went out and took out loans they couldn't pay. Now, as I say, I'm happy the Supreme Court ruled the way it did, but I've got a problem with it, okay? Matter of fact, I've got two problems with it. One, Supreme Court didn't rule outright that it was unconstitutional for government to take money from you to pay somebody else's debt. It didn't do that. More about that in a minute. What it did was say Biden didn't follow the proper procedures and go through Congress to rob you. What? What the Supreme Court said was it's okay to rob people as long as you go through Congress to do it. The Supreme Court said it's okay for government to go to the folks like on this street here, all of whom are blue collar folks, and steal their money to pay for a bunch of frat boys to go to college. Let me add, I am a frat boy. I went to college. I was a teak. Matter of fact, it was really the highlight of my college life, Tau Kappa Epsilon. So I don't have anything real deep down against frat boys. I am one. But I do have a problem with the guy who's out there, like my good friend Gary, who is a mechanic, incredibly hard worker, being told we're going to take your money and pay Freddie Frat Boy's loan that he can't afford to pay and never should have taken out. Now, this is the problem here that we have to face, and the reason we need to totally restructure our political system. The politicians actually think that if you follow the right formulas, it's okay to rob you to pay somebody else's debt. What kind of nonsense is that? How could that possibly? Now, the Roberts Court says that if you do it that way, go through Congress, it's constitutional. And we have to make sure we have politicians who would never even think of doing such a thing. Okay? Never even think of doing such a thing. And that's why we need, as I said, to restructure the entire political system. Okay? To make sure we elect people from the workaday world who understand there's something wrong with that idea of the members of the Senate or House, most of whom have never had a real job in their lives. The majority of the members of the Senate are lawyers. Okay? Lawyers who rank in opinion polls usually beneath used car salesmen, and usually rightly so. Okay? Most of the members of Congress, House and Senate, have never held a real world job. I have to tell you, Chuck Schumer has never held a real world job. Joseph Robinette Biden has never held a real world job. So they don't know how it feels to go out and get your hands dirty working for a living, and then have somebody come along and steal it from you, the money that you've worked so hard to earn. That's why they would think of even doing such a thing as student loans. Forget. Here's kind of a rule of thumb. If you borrow money, you repay it. That's logic. We don't need a constitutional ruling on that. And we do need politicians who understand that from the get-go. It's what we're going to be fighting for, as in 2024, Constitutional Rights PAC helps recruit candidates who have a basic understanding of common decency. Okay? And then we need your help to do it. Just go to constitutionalrightspac.com and sign up, because we can't stand any more of these politicians who never worked at it. Kevin McCarthy never worked in a real world job in his entire adult life. Okay? What do these people do? Nancy Pelosi, daughter of a former mafia-owned mayor of Baltimore, a mafia princess. Okay? That ain't real world work. So we have our job cut out. You know, I wish Supreme Court had said, of course you can't steal money from one person to pay somebody else's debts. That violates due process. But they didn't do that. They said, well, it's unconstitutional the way you did it, but here's the way you can do it, to go ahead and steal from working people to give to Freddie Frotter and Sally Sorority. I'm sorry, that's not fair. It's not fair, and we have to fight it, all right? So, good Supreme Court ruling as far as it went, but we have to make sure the politicians take it a lot further by getting real world, hard-working people in those political offices. So let's do this thing.